I never expected to learn that the woman who smiled at me across Sunday dinners had quietly stolen the last thing my father ever left me. I didn't expect the discovery to come from a cracked envelope tucked behind my mother's old recipe box, and I definitely didn't expect the truth to tear my marriage in half, but it did, and I'm glad you're here to listen, because I don't think anyone in my life ever really believed how deep this cut went. So sit with me for a moment. Let me walk you into the world I lived in before everything snapped, before the whispers, before the papers, before the lies got too heavy to keep pretending nothing was wrong. I grew up in a small Midwestern town. Nothing fancy, nothing shiny. We lived in a modest one-story house with fading blue siding and a porch that always creaked, even when no one was walking. My parents worked hard, the kind of hard that shows in the slow way they sat down after work, rubbing their knees, sighing, in that tired but grateful way people do when they know bills are paid but barely. We weren't poor, but we weren't far from it. Dad worked at the grain mill since he was 19. Mom cleaned houses part-time and made enough to keep groceries stocked and Christmas decent. There was always food, always warmth, always love, just not a lot of anything extra. My in-laws, though, they lived in another universe. Big white house on the edge of town, 3 acres of trimmed grass. They threw parties that looked like something you'd see in a magazine. They took vacations every year. My future mother-in-law, Claire, always had jewelry that matched her outfits, shoes that clicked just the right way on polished floors, and a voice that carried through every room. The kind of woman who always sounded like she was delivering a line she'd rehearsed. When I first started dating my husband, well, my future husband back then, I remember walking into their house and feeling like I had dirt on my shoes even when I didn't. Not because they said anything, not because they looked down on me outright, but because everything about that house whispered, we don't come from the same world. Still, they welcomed me, or at least, they acted like they did. My mother-in-law always hugged me with arms that barely touched my back. She always told me I was such a sweet girl. But her eyes were busy scanning whatever I wore, whatever I brought, whatever I said. She did that thing women do, the silent measuring. I felt it every time, but I ignored it. Love makes us blind, or maybe hopeful. I was 18 when I met my husband, 20 when we got engaged. I believed in blending families, in giving people chances, in assuming the best. Looking back, I can see the warning signs, but back then, the only thing I cared about was building a life with the man I love. My parents were thrilled. They adored my husband, Dad especially. My father used to say, he's a good man, sweetheart, a real man. He'll take care of you. I believed him. God, I wish Dad had been right. Dad got sick when I was 24. It came fast, the kind of fast you don't see in movies, the kind of fast that knocks the breath out of you and leaves you grabbing at air, trying to make sense of the hours slipping through your hands. Lung cancer, stage 4, 6 months that changed everything about who I was and what I valued. I was with him almost every day, and he'd do that thing he always did, pat my hand with his calloused fingers and say, it'll be all right, you're stronger than you think. But I didn't feel strong. I felt 24, terrified and angry at the unfairness of it all. When Dad passed, the world got quieter in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. Mom dissolved into grief. I carried everything I could for her: bills, funeral paperwork, settling accounts, trying to keep her upright while I felt like crumbling myself. My husband was supportive in the beginning, but something shifted. Maybe grief is too heavy for some people to carry secondhand. Maybe I expected more than he could give. Maybe he just didn't like my sadness taking up so much space. His mother stepped in more than I expected. She brought casseroles, sent flowers, sat with Mom. At least that's what I thought she was doing. The truth was far more complicated, but at the time, I accepted the help. It felt good to have someone older, someone confident, someone who knew how to handle things, or at least looked like she did, guiding us. Weeks turned into months. Mom slowly regained her footing. I tried to focus on our future, my marriage, my job, the life Dad wanted for me. I didn't know there was a storm brewing underneath all of it. I didn't know that while I was nursing my grief, someone else was rearranging pieces of my life without my knowledge. The first crack appeared almost a year after Dad died. Just a tiny moment, the kind of moment you brush off at first. Mom mentioned a letter Dad had left for me. I hadn't received any letter. She said she'd given it to my mother-in-law because she offered to help organize everything. A letter from Dad, and my mother-in-law had it. I remember standing in Mom's kitchen, frozen. The old fridge hummed, the fluorescent light flickered slightly, and I felt something tighten in my chest. A tiny, sharp squeeze. It was the first sign, the first little shadow on the wall, but I dismissed it. My mother-in-law was helping. Why wouldn't she hold on to something important? Maybe she forgot to give it to me. Maybe she put it somewhere safe. I wanted to believe the best, but that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling while my husband snored beside me, I kept thinking, why didn't she tell me? Why keep something from me? Why that letter? A small discomfort, barely anything, but it stayed with me, like a splinter you can't find under the skin, and it was only the beginning, because the letter wasn't the only thing my mother-in-law had taken. The truth was so much bigger, so much uglier, and it lived right under our noses. I just didn't know yet how far she'd gone, how much she'd stolen, or how much of my father's last wishes she had quietly rewritten behind my back, but I was about to find out. And when I did, nothing about my life, my marriage, or my family would ever be the same. Before everything blew apart, my life looked ordinary, comfortably ordinary, the kind of life where the problems were small and familiar, and the routines were steady enough that you didn't think much about them until they were gone. Back then, my mornings had a rhythm. I'd wake up before my husband, move quietly around the kitchen, and start coffee in the old drip pot we'd gotten as a wedding gift. The smell always filled the house first, warm and earthy, drifting through the small hallway toward our bedroom. I loved that smell. It made the place feel lived in, like a home instead of just a building. I worked at a local clinic, admin work, nothing fancy. My days were predictable: insurance calls, scheduling appointments, updating charts. Sometimes I'd chat with the nurses on lunch breaks, or trade stories with the older receptionist, who'd worked there so long she practically came with the building. My husband worked construction, doing contracting jobs with his father. He came home every day tired, dusty, and hungry. I used to think there was something grounding about that, about a man coming home from physical work and washing the day off before dinner. Our evenings were quiet. We'd sit on the couch, sometimes watching reruns, sometimes talking about nothing at all. On weekends, we drove over to his parents' house for dinner. They did that big, old-fashioned Sunday supper thing: a roast, potatoes, green beans, rolls, brushed with butter until they glistened, that his mother always hosted. My mother-in-law, Claire, everyone called her elegant, though not always kindly. She carried herself like the air belonged to her. She made space for herself by simply existing. Her hair was always pulled into a perfect twist, her lipstick never smudged, her bracelets thin and gold. She moved through her home the way some women move through department stores, gently glancing at everything while keeping herself above it. And me, I was comfortable enough around her, or at least I convinced myself I was. She never said anything outright cruel. She never insulted me, never started a fight. She was polite in that way that left you wondering if she meant any of it. But my husband adored her. He didn't just love her, he admired her. Every decision she made, every opinion she had, he absorbed like it was the final word. I used to find it sweet, the way sons cling to their mothers. I used to think it meant he'd be good to me. My father always told me, a man who respects his mama knows how to treat his wife. God, I held on to that. Before Dad died, my life had direction. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. We had a small apartment, a reliable car, and a savings jar tucked behind cereal boxes where we kept loose bills whenever we could spare them. We talked about buying a house one day, nothing big. Maybe just a 2-bedroom with a yard for the dog we planned to adopt someday. Someday, that word used to feel like a promise. Later, it would feel like a joke. When Dad got sick, everything blurred. The days lost structure. The nights felt longer. The world shrank to hospital rooms, waiting chairs, soft beeps from monitors that made my stomach twist. But even then, there was comfort in the people around me. Mom drifted through the days in a trance, soft-spoken, unfocused, fragile in a way I'd never seen before. I became her stand-in heart, trying to feel the things she couldn't, trying to stay strong for her. My husband held my hand at appointments. He drove us to chemo sessions. He took over cooking on nights I couldn't even look at food. He was quiet, but steady, present. And Claire, she stepped in like she'd practiced for it. She'd bring food to the house when Mom couldn't eat. She'd sit beside her and make soft, soothing noises about grief, about life, about the unfairness of everything. She always seemed to know exactly what Mom needed to hear. At the time, I thought it was kindness, generosity, heart. Now, looking backward, I can see the careful angles of it, the way she positioned herself in every decision, the way she always offered to help with paperwork, bills, forms, but back then, I was too overwhelmed to question any of it. After the funeral, life didn't return to normal. It rebuilt itself into something new, something hollowed, but manageable. Mom spent more time at home, trying to find her footing. My husband went back to work, and I moved through my days carrying a heaviness I didn't talk about much. I tried. I really did. I'd go to Sunday dinners, even though grief made the room feel too full. I'd smile when Claire asked if I was doing all right, dear, in that delicate voice of hers. And sometimes, only sometimes, I caught something in her eyes, a flicker, a calculation. I brushed it off. I needed peace, not conflict. I needed my world to stay stable, but little things started feeling off. There was the time my husband came home from his mother's with an envelope of papers for safekeeping. I asked what they were, and he shrugged. Just some things Mom said to hold on to, he told me, stuffing them into a drawer before I could see. There was the moment during dinner when Claire mentioned, too casually, "I've been going over some of your father's documents, dear." He wasn't the most organized, was he? I remember freezing, fork halfway to my mouth. How had she gotten those documents? Why did she have them? But then, she smiled, warm and reassuring, and said, "Don't worry, I'll help your mother figure things out. It's a lot to handle alone." A reasonable explanation, a kind one, even, yet something inside me tightened. Not fear, not anger, just a sense of imbalance, like when a picture frame hangs slightly crooked and you can't stop noticing it. Still, I told myself to let it go. My father had trusted her. My husband trusted her. Surely I could too. Life went on like that for months, me trying to rebuild, Claire easing herself into pieces of my family's business, my husband standing beside her, as if the two of them had some shared understanding I wasn't privy to. Looking back, the warning signs weren't loud, they didn't shout, they whispered. A form missing, a comment deflected, a question answered a little too quickly. Like the time Mom mentioned the letter, Dad's letter, and my mother-in-law's name slipped into the sentence like it belonged there. Or the time my husband told me, "Mom just wants to help, babe. Don't overthink it," with a tone that made me feel small for even asking. Those moments didn't break anything. They didn't even dent the surface, but they settled inside me, one by one, the way sand collects in the corners of a room. And then, one afternoon, months before the truth would fully unravel, Mom said something that chilled me more than she meant it to. She said, "Your mother-in-law has been such a blessing, sweetheart. I don't know what we'd do without her." Her voice was soft, grateful, but something about the way she said it, the way she depended on that woman, the way she trusted her without hesitation, made a knot form right under my ribs. Something, deep down, whispered, "Are you sure she's helping? Are you sure she isn't taking?" And that thought didn't go away. The day everything truly began to shift wasn't remarkable on the surface. It was a Thursday, cool, cloudy, the kind of Midwest day that makes everything feel gray. I'd stopped by my mother's house after work, wanting to check on her before heading home. She'd been having one of her quiet spells again, drifting around the house like she was looking for something she couldn't name. I let myself in. The door always stuck just a little, so I had to shove my shoulder against it. It groaned open, and I called out, "Mom, it's me." She answered from the kitchen, her voice thin but steady. I walked in and saw her standing over the table, sorting through a few boxes. They were ones we hadn't touched since the months after Dad's death, the months when every cardboard flap felt like it carried too much weight. She looked up when I entered. "I'm going through some of your father's things," she said, "just trying to get organized." A familiar ache rose in my chest, but I forced a small smile. "You need help?" She shook her head. No, I think I've got it." I nodded and reached for a mug to make coffee. I wasn't looking for anything unusual. I wasn't expecting anything at all. I was just moving through the quiet, heavy rhythm I'd gotten used to. But then Mom spoke again, almost casually. "Your mother-in-law said she needed a few more papers. Something about the last insurance statement." I froze. The spoon clinked against the mug, louder than it should have. "Wait," I said slowly, turning toward her. "She needed more papers." Mom didn't notice my tone. She just kept sorting. Whom? She said she was helping handle things so we don't miss any deadlines. I gave her the folder she asked for. A cold pinprick moved down my spine. "What folder?" Mom tapped the edge of a box. "The yellow one, The one with the insurance summary and the older statements. She said she'd bring it back. I felt my mouth go dry. The yellow folder wasn't just any folder. It had Dad's insurance records, his pension outline, his personal beneficiary notes, things that mattered, things that weren't supposed to leave this house. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. When did you give it to her? Oh, 2 days ago. 3, maybe. She frowned like she was trying to remember. She said it was important. Important. Important for who? I sat down across from her, my stomach tightening. Did she explain why? Mom shrugged. She said something about helping with your portion, sweetheart, making sure everything is in order for you. My portion, that my inheritance. The words didn't sound like Mom's. They sounded like echoing of someone else's phrasing, someone who'd planted them gently into her mind. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at her, and something clicked quietly in the back of my mind. This wasn't just help. This was access, and access becomes ownership if nobody questions it. But I still tried to give benefit of the doubt. I still tried to breathe and reason through it. Mom, I said softly, why didn't you tell me she asked for it? She blinked. I assumed you already knew. She said she talked to you. My heart stopped for half a second. She what? Mom's eyes widened slightly, confused. She said you two discussed it, that you were thankful for her help. A strange buzzing filled my ears, because I had never not once talked to Claire about Dad's insurance papers. We hadn't discussed anything. I hadn't asked her for help. I didn't even know she had access to those documents. That was the moment the floor beneath me shifted, even if just by an inch. But the day wasn't done. Later that evening, I went home, replaying every conversation I'd had with my mother-in-law over the past months, the small remarks, the quiet suggestions, the subtle redirects. Suddenly, they didn't feel so harmless anymore. When my husband came in from work, dirt on his boots and exhaustion on his face, I asked him the simplest question I could. Did your mom say anything about helping with my dad's papers? He didn't even blink. Yeah, he said. She mentioned something. I waited. He didn't elaborate. What did she say? I pressed. He shrugged and opened the fridge. Just that she's helping your mom handle the boring stuff. She knows more about this kind of thing than either of you. I clenched my jaw. Did she tell you she took the insurance folder? He froze for just a fraction of a second. A tiny, barely there hesitation. Then, he pulled out a soda. She didn't take it, he said casually. She's just looking it over. Looking it over, like it belonged to her. I felt a flicker of irritation, small, but sharp. Why wouldn't she ask me first? He let out a breath that sounded too much like annoyance. Babe, it's not a big deal. My mom knows what she's doing. She's trying to help. But it is a big deal, I insisted. It's my dad's paperwork. He shut the fridge harder than necessary. Mom said you were overwhelmed. She thought she was making things easier. There it was, the idea she'd planted, the convenient framing, the gentle rewriting of truth. I swallowed my anger, for the moment. Later that night, he fell asleep quickly, like he always did. I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling just like I had the night my mom mentioned the letter. Only this time, the unease had grown teeth. My mind drifted to Dad's will, to the lawyer meeting after the funeral, to the sealed envelopes we'd been given, the ones we were supposed to keep safe, to the list of beneficiaries he'd made painstakingly, wanting to make sure no one felt overlooked. I hadn't thought about the details in months. Grief had blurred everything. But now I wondered, what else had Claire looked over? What else had Mom handed her without thinking? A tiny pulse of dread started tapping under my ribs. The next morning, I went back to Mom's house before work. I pretended I was just dropping by with breakfast. We ate together, quiet, gentle. She seemed brighter that morning, humming a little as she stacked dishes. But I couldn't stop staring at the boxes on the table. Hey Mom, I said, as casually as I could, where's the folder for the will stuff? The one Dad kept with the fireproof documents. She pointed to a drawer in the hallway cabinet. Right there, sweetheart. I opened the drawer. 2 envelopes, one thick, one thin. The thin one was the standard copy, the one the lawyer had given us. The thick one, it felt off, too light. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Inside were only 3 pages. 3. There should have been 15. I flipped them over, hoping they were stuck. They weren't. The itemized list of assets was missing. Dad's handwritten amendments were missing. The signature sheets were missing. The notarized addendum, the one he'd drafted 6 months before he died, was gone. Mom, I called out, my voice tight. Where are the rest of these? She came over, brows furrowed. The rest of what, honey? These pages, I said, turning the envelope upside down. There should be more. She looked confused. I think she has them, Claire, Mom said simply. She said she needed to review them. The room spun, just for a second. I stared at the nearly empty envelope, and something inside me broke loose, small, but undeniable. This wasn't help. This wasn't organization. This wasn't kindness. This was interference, and I was finally awake enough to see it. Mom watched my face shift, worry creeping into her eyes. Sweetheart, are you okay? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. What exactly did she take? Her mouth opened, then closed. She pressed a hand to her forehead, thinking. I gave her several things, insurance stuff, his old financial notes, some letters. She said she needed everything to understand how to handle your father's. She stopped. I don't know if she heard herself, but I did everything. She'd handed her everything. A slow ache climbed into my chest, because if Claire had all of that, the documents, the amendments, the insurance notes, the letters, then she had full control over understanding Dad's final wishes, and full control over what happened next. The weight of that reality settled into my bones. Something was wrong, very, very wrong. And this time, I couldn't ignore it. I wish I could tell you that discovering the truth came in one clean revelation, like pulling a sheet off a piece of furniture and seeing exactly what was underneath. But it wasn't like that. It was slower, messier. It felt like peeling wallpaper and finding layers of mold you didn't know were growing behind the walls of your own life. And it started with something so small, I almost ignored it. I found one of my dad's old bank envelopes tucked between the pages of a cookbook my mom kept by the stove. Nothing unusual, she used anything as a bookmark, but when I shook it, papers slipped out. Papers with my father's handwriting. My heart jumped, but I told myself to stay calm. Dad kept lists and notes and random reminders everywhere. This could have been anything. But when I opened the pages and saw the title, Revised Will, Final Draft, my hands went cold. I sat down right there, on the kitchen floor. The tile felt cold through my jeans as I smoothed out the pages. Dad's handwriting filled the margins, and I recognized the way he looped the letter Y, the way he pushed too hard with his pen so some lines looked almost engraved. It was unmistakably his dot, and the more I read, the quieter the world got. Everything was spelled out clearly. Dad didn't leave the house to the oldest child, the way Claire had told us. He left the house to me, because I had provided care, stability, and presence. His exact words, he left my brother the truck, the tools, and the small plot of hunting land he cared about. He left my mother a separate account, and the right to stay in the home for life. It was fair, balanced, loving, he had thought, about all of us, and none of it matched what we'd been told. I felt my chest tighten, not panic, something worse, devastation wrapped in clarity. The kind of truth that doesn't explode, it seeps. I read the document again, then again. On the third read, my eyes caught something in the corner. Dad had initialed each page. I flipped through them, checking, all there, all signed. And then one more thing, a note in the margin on page 2. Give original to attorney on Tuesday after doctor visit, Tuesday. The same Tuesday he never made it to, because he'd had a sudden stroke that morning. I sat frozen. My father had intended to update everything, but he never made it to the attorney. That meant the revised draft in my hands wasn't the legally filed one, but it did confirm something. Claire had lied, because she had insisted there was only one version. She told us Dad never changed anything. She told us she had helped Mom gather the papers because Mom was too distressed. She told us there was no other draft, but Dad's handwriting didn't lie. I slid the papers back into the envelope and held it to my chest. My hands were shaken, my thoughts scattered like spilled marbles. All I knew was, I needed to talk to my mother. I found her on the porch, rocking slowly like she always did when she tried to soothe herself. I sat beside her, opened the envelope, and set the pages in her lap. She stared at them for a long time, too long. Her lips trembled before she spoke. I knew he wrote something. I didn't know where it went. Her voice was small, fragile, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. What do you mean? I whispered. I remember him writing late at night. He told me he wanted to make things easier for us, simpler. She reached up and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. Right after he died, I asked Claire to help me gather his papers. I was overwhelmed, honey. I didn't even know where to begin. The moment she said it, I felt a sharp, nauseating twist in my stomach. Mom, did you ever see this draft after that? She shook her head slowly. No, Claire said, there was nothing else important. She said the will in the safe was the only one. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and felt the burn behind my eyelids. The pieces were falling together whether I wanted them to or not. I asked carefully, did you see her go through the safe? She nodded again. She said she'd organized everything. I trusted her. Those words, I trusted her, sliced through me. I didn't want to believe Claire would do something so calculated, but the more I replayed the past few months, the more her behavior made sense. The weird avoidance whenever I brought up Dad's intentions, the rushed explanation about the attorney's copy, the way she insisted she was just trying to help. It was like watching a puzzle assemble itself. Still, I needed something more concrete, something that couldn't be brushed off as a misunderstanding. So I called Dad's old attorney. I didn't tell Mom, I didn't want to worry her yet. When his assistant picked up, I asked the simple question that would become the first hammer hitting the wall. Did my father ever bring in a revised will for filing around the time of his passing? She put me on hold. My heart thudded like it had moved up into my throat. When she came back, she said gently, no, he didn't file a revised document, but he left a message with us the week before, expressing that he wanted an appointment to update his will. My grip tightened around the phone, and, she added, your sister-in-law called 2 days after your father passed asking about the file, but because she wasn't legally authorized, we couldn't release anything. I felt like I'd been punched. Air rushed out of my lungs. What did she ask? My voice barely held steady. She wanted to confirm there were no updated documents. When we told her there weren't, she said she figured as much. I didn't remember hanging up. I just remember standing there, staring at the wall, the room suddenly still, too quiet. My dad had tried to update everything. Claire had known, she had checked, she had controlled the story we were told. And now the last piece settled in, heavy and undeniable. If Claire had come across the revised draft while organizing Dad's papers, she had hidden it. Not destroyed it, because she would have been too scared to actually remove evidence, but tucked it away, somewhere she thought no one would look. Maybe she assumed Mom wouldn't remember where things were. Maybe she believed we'd accept the story she crafted. And we did, for a while. But after I found the draft, after I spoke to the attorney, after I replayed Claire's words, everything aligned. My mother-in-law, the woman who'd always claimed fairness, kindness, and family unity, had quietly slipped her hands into my family's grief and rearranged our future like it was hers to manage. And there it was, the lowest point. Not the betrayal itself, but the realization that she had used the moment of our deepest vulnerability to solidify her own children's advantages. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hallway in slow, tight circles, holding the envelope like it might float away if I let go. The house felt different, smaller, somehow. I felt betrayed not only by Claire, but by myself, for not seeing it sooner. And under all that hurt, something else was forming, something calmer, sharper, more focused. Resolve, because once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. And once someone tries to erase your place in your own family's story, you fight to write it back in. Even if the world thinks you're being dramatic, even if your mother is too gentle to confront the deception, even if Claire believes she has already won. I stood at the kitchen counter as dawn crept through the window, mixing with my exhaustion, and I whispered to myself, not a promise, not a threat, just a certainty. This isn't over. The morning after I found the revised draft, I woke up with a different kind of ache, not the heavy, hopeless grief that had been sitting on my chest for months, but something cleaner, sharper, like the sting after you pour alcohol on a cut. It hurts, but it tells you you're still alive, still capable of doing something about the wound. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the envelope right in front of me. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it while steam curled from my mug. I could feel the anger rising in waves, but it wasn't the wild, frantic kind anymore. No, this time, it was measured, cold around the edges. I knew I wasn't ready to confront Claire yet. If I approached her with raw emotion, she'd flip the script. She always did. She'd soften her face, tilt her head, maybe even place a hand on my arm and say she never meant for things to spiral. And suddenly I'd be reduced to the overly sensitive one. Not this time. I would be precise. I spent the entire day planning quietly, letting the steps settle in my mind one by one. Small steps, controlled, thoughtful. My father wasn't a dramatic man. He believed in calm solutions. If I was going to honor him, I needed to move the way he would have moved. The first step was simple. Find out what else Claire handled during those vulnerable weeks after he passed. The second step, figure out which conversations she believed I'd never question. And the third, well, that one was harder, but I knew it would come. I started with my mother. That evening, she was folding laundry in the living room, slow and methodical, like every towel required full concentration. Grief does that. It turns the brain into a sponge that doesn't know how to absorb anything new. I sat next to her and kept my voice calm. Mom, when Dad passed, did you go through his desk yourself? Or did Claire do most of it? She sighed softly. I told her she didn't have to, but she insisted, said it'd be easier for me. I nodded, watching her hands move over a towel she'd already folded twice. And the safe, did you open it alone, at any point? Or was Claire always there? She opened it, Mom whispered. She said it was best if she handled the documents. She said I might get too emotional. I closed my eyes, but only for a second, long enough to steady myself. Did she tell you what was inside before she handed anything to the attorney? No, Mom said. She just said everything matched what she explained to you all. There it was. Confirmation. Pure and unfiltered. Claire had orchestrated everything. She positioned herself between my mother's grief and the truth. She knew exactly what she was doing. I stayed quiet, partly because I didn't want Mom to feel guilty, and partly because I needed to let this new version of myself settle, the version that wasn't afraid to look Claire in the eye and refused to shrink. Later that night, after Mom went to bed, I took out a notebook and started writing. Not ranting, writing. Dates, statements, moments. I made a timeline, a clean, simple map of everything Claire touched, everything she said, everything that didn't add up. With each line I wrote, the fog in my mind lifted a little more. Around midnight, as the house sat still around me, the plan came into focus. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. I didn't even need to tell Claire what I knew. I just needed to show everyone the truth. In her presence, she thrived on being the storyteller, the one explaining, the one guiding people's understanding of events, so the only way to expose her would be to take the narrative out of her hands, publicly, calmly, right, in front of the people she believed she could manipulate, would hold a family gathering, not a dramatic intervention, not a screaming match, something simple. A dinner, a memorial observance for Dad. I knew Claire wouldn't refuse that, not when appearances mattered so much to her. And once everyone was there, surrounded by the memories she thought she controlled, I would present the revised draft, not like a weapon, but like a truth that simply existed, a truth she had tried to bury. I imagined the moment over and over, Claire's face shifting as she realized what was happening, my brother looking carefully at each page, seeing our father's handwriting, my mother finally understanding that her trust had been betrayed at her most fragile moment. But even as I pictured it, I felt something else. Doubt, not doubt about Claire, not doubt about the truth, doubt about myself. Was I doing this for justice, or for revenge? I sat with that question longer than I expected. It mattered, because the story I wanted to tell at the end of all this, the story that would follow me, follow Mom, follow my father's memory, needed to come from a place of dignity. So I asked myself quietly, honestly, what would justice look like if it wasn't fueled by fury? And the answer was simple. Justice would look like Dad's intentions restored. Justice would look like Mom understanding she was never at fault. Justice would look like my family knowing exactly what Claire had done, without me screaming it at them. Justice would look like peace, not scorched earth. Once I separated revenge from justice, the path grew clearer. I didn't need to destroy Claire. I didn't need to ruin her reputation or her relationships. The truth itself would do enough, and once that truth was out, I could walk away with my head high. The next morning, I called my brother. I kept my tone steady. I'm hosting a small supper next week, for Dad, just a quiet gathering. He agreed immediately. He'd been missing connection to loss, scatters people. This was a way to pull us back together. Then, after a moment, he asked, should I tell Claire? I swallowed, letting the pause stretch just long enough to feel intentional. Yes, I said. Make sure she's there. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. That alone told me I was stepping into a different emotional space, one where clarity outpaced fear. Over the next few days, I gathered everything I needed, copies of the draft, notes of my conversation with the attorney, dates and times, not to attack, but to confirm. I didn't rehearse a speech. I didn't script anything. All I needed was to let the truth sit in the room long enough that no one could deny it. By the time the day of the gathering arrived, I felt a calmness settle into me, not because I wasn't scared, but because I was prepared. And preparation is its own kind of armor. As I set the table, smoothing the napkins, placing candles in the center, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked tired. God, I looked tired, but I also looked steady, grounded, ready. When the doorbell rang, I inhaled once, letting the breath anchor me, and walked toward the sound, because this wasn't the climax. This was the step right before it, the moment the tide shifts, quietly, before the wave rises. And Claire had no idea what truth was waiting for her on the other side of that door. The storm was coming, but it would be her own choices that created it. The evening of the gathering felt strange from the moment the first car pulled into the driveway. The sky was dimming, the porch light flickered on, and there was this charged stillness in the air, like everything was holding its breath. I opened the door to my brother and Claire. He smiled, tired but warm. Claire didn't. She was already scanning the room behind me, checking who was there, what was where, mentally assessing control before she even took off her coat. That was Claire's way. She needed to set the tone. But tonight, the tone wasn't hers. I stepped aside. Come in. My voice was calm. Too calm. She noticed, one by one, the rest of the family arrived. Cousins, an aunt or two, my mother moving slowly, leaning on the rail as she walked up the steps. Everyone thought this dinner was just a soft remembrance for Dad, a way to reconnect. And in many ways, it was, but underneath it, a truth was waiting. And Claire had no idea. We ate first. Quiet conversation floated around the table. Small stories about Dad. The kind people tell to fill space while avoiding the heavier things they don't want to touch. Claire dominated the small talk, as usual. She always liked to guide the narrative: who said what, how people felt, how things should be understood. Her tone was honeyed, practiced, but I could feel her glancing at me now and then. She sensed something off-kilter, something she couldn't place. Because control was slipping from her hands, grain by grain. When the plates were cleared, I stood up slowly. My heartbeat wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, purposeful. I want to share something of Dad's, I said. Everyone looked up, even Claire, especially Claire. I walked into the living room and picked up the envelope I'd left on the coffee table plain. White, unremarkable, but inside, a storm waited. When I turned back to the room, Claire's eyes locked on the envelope like it had teeth. I sat beside Mom and placed the envelope in my lap. This is something Dad wrote shortly before he passed. I began, a draft of his revised will. Silence, not tense, yet just curious. I opened the envelope carefully. The paper rustled. My mother inhaled softly. My brother leaned forward. But Claire stayed perfectly still, too still. I laid the first page on the coffee table where everyone could see the handwriting. This is Dad's, my brother said quietly. He didn't have to ask. He recognized it instantly. I placed the second page beside it, then the third. Claire swallowed. I watched her throat tighten. This version, I continued, was found tucked into one of Mom's cookbooks. Dad wrote notes on every page. He initialed them. He left instructions to bring this to the attorney on the Tuesday after his doctor visit. I paused, let the words settle. This was the moment the truth shifted from private to public. My brother frowned, confused. But Claire said yes. I cut in gently. I know what she said. I pulled out my notebook, the timeline, the dates, the call to the attorney. After Dad passed, Claire went through his desk. She opened the safe. She handled the documents before Mom ever had the chance. She also called Dad's attorney 2 days after he died to confirm there was no updated will. My brother looked at her, really looked. She turned slightly toward him, already forming excuses behind her eyes. That's not. I was just trying to help, she began. No, I said quietly, firmly. You told us Dad never changed anything. You told us there were no drafts. You told Mom there was nothing important missing. I tapped the pages lightly, but this was here. He wrote it. He meant it. And you saw it. I didn't. Her voice cracked for the first time. You saw it, I repeated. Or you handled the papers where it was. That's enough. My aunt leaned in, scanning the document with a slow, skeptical breath. My mother's hands trembled in her lap. My brother picked up one of the pages, reading Dad's handwriting. His face changed to confusion, the dawning realization, the betrayal twisting through him like he couldn't swallow it down fast enough. He looked at Claire. Did you know about this? She blinked hard. I thought it was an old draft. I didn't think it mattered. I was trying to keep things simple. Tension snapped across the room. I leaned forward. You didn't think it mattered that Dad left the house to me, that he spelled out exactly why, that he gave you no authority to decide which documents were important. She stood abruptly. I was helping your mother. She was devastated. I was trying to protect her. My mother looked up at her eyes hurt. No anger, just deep, tired sadness. Protect me from what? Claire stuttered. From complications. No, I said again. You weren't protecting her. You were protecting the version of the story that benefited your children. Her face flushed, red, uneven. You're twisting everything, she snapped. You're doing this to humiliate me. No, this wasn't humiliation. This was exposure. I kept my voice calm. I didn't call this gathering to humiliate anyone. I called it because Dad deserves for his intentions to be honored. Mom deserves to know what really happened. And we deserve the truth. My brother rubbed his forehead. Claire, why didn't you tell us? She folded her arms tightly, her breath quickening. The room waited. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, she whispered, barely audible, because I didn't think she'd handle the house well. The room went still. Mom whispered. So you decided for me. Claire's eyes closed, just for a moment, like she wanted to escape inside her own skin. I placed the rest of the documents on the table, attorney notes, timelines, everything. The truth sat there, undeniable. My brother stepped back from her slowly. Hurt, shocked. You crossed the line, he said. Claire's jaw tightened. I was doing what I thought was right for our family. And you forgot we're part of that family. I said. More silence. Heavy, real. Then my mother stood unsteadily and picked up the revised draft. She held it with both hands, reading Dad's handwriting as tears began to fall down her cheeks. She whispered, he meant this. He really meant this. I didn't touch her. I didn't have to. This moment belonged to her. My brother turned to me, voice rough. We're fixing this. Claire looked between us, realizing the shift. Not a fight, not a screaming match, but a complete loss of the control she'd held so tightly. I didn't mean, she started again, but my brother cut her off. Enough. Just one word, but it echoed, and in that moment, the truth that she'd tried so hard to bear quietly, carefully, strategically stood in full view of everyone. No shouting, no chaos, just clarity, clear enough that even she couldn't talk her way around it. She sank into her chair, small for the first time I'd ever seen her, small because the truth had finally grown bigger than her lies. And in that stillness, in that quiet collapse of her version of events, I felt it. The justice of the moment, the emotional payoff, the release. This was the storm, not loud, not violent, just true. And now, the aftermath would begin. The room didn't move at first, after the truth spilled across the table. Quiet, but undeniably was like the air thickened. No one spoke, no one even shifted in their seat. Everyone just sat there, absorbing the weight of what Dad's handwriting meant, and what Claire's silence had stolen from us. Finally, my brother cleared his throat, the sound rough and broken. I think we need a minute, he said. He took a step back from the table, his hand going to his forehead like he suddenly couldn't trust the ground beneath him. It wasn't anger that filled his face, now it was grief. Grief for trust that shouldn't have been broken. Grief for the marriage he'd believed had loyalty at its core. Claire reached for him, but he moved away instinctively. A small motion, but it spoke volumes. Her hand froze in mid-air before falling back to her lap. My mother looked at us, her children, like we were the two ends of a rope she had spent her whole life tying together, and now she was terrified of watching it fray. She turned to Claire, voice trembling but controlled. Why didn't you just tell me he wrote this? I would have listened. I would have talked to you. Claire swallowed hard. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an answer that might soften the truth. Finally, she whispered, because I didn't trust you'd make the right decision. My mother's face changed slowly, painfully. Not shock, not even anger. Something far heavier, hurt layered over years of small wounds she'd never voiced out loud. I've managed this family for decades, Mom said softly. I buried your father with my own hands, shaking, and you thought I couldn't handle a piece of paper. My brother closed his eyes like he couldn't bear hearing it. I stayed quiet. This wasn't my moment to step in. This was Claire's reckoning. Claire's voice broke. I thought keeping everything simple was best. For everyone. My aunt spoke, sharp and direct. Simple for who? Claire flinched. My brother sat down heavily, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. You had no right, he said. each word strained. No right to decide what Mom could handle. No right to hide Dad's intention. No right to choose what my sister deserved. Claire looked back at me then, and there was something in her eyes I had never seen. Raw fear. Not fear of consequences. Fear of being seen for what she'd done. I didn't mean to steal from you, she whispered to me. I panicked. The house, your kids, you've been struggling. And I thought, maybe if everything went equal. I held up my hand. Calm, steady, equal, isn't the same as fair. The words hit her, harder than I expected. My brother pushed back from the table suddenly, the chair legs scraping across the wood floor. He walked into the kitchen, gripping the counter like he needed something solid to hold on to. For a moment, everyone just watched his back. Then he said, without turning around, "We're fixing this, whatever it takes." His voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It was full of a steady resolve I hadn't heard from him since Dad died. Claire stood so quickly her chair rocked. "You're not thinking clearly. You're upset. We should talk about this at home, just us." No. He turned around then, and his eyes made Claire sit right back down. "We're talking about this with the people who deserved honesty from the beginning." My cousin spoke quietly from the other end of the table. "Claire, you always push things. We've seen it for years." Claire looked like someone had slapped her. I added gently, "This isn't about you being the villain. It's about what Dad wanted, and how we honor that." She sank into her chair, a slow collapse. Mom wiped her eyes and touched the corner of Dad's draft. "I want the house to go where he meant it to go," she said firmly. "And he meant it for her." She nodded toward me. Her voice wavered but didn't break. I saw how carefully he explained it. "I know why he did it." Claire's lip trembled. "You're choosing her over us." Mom shook her head. "No, I'm choosing honesty over comfort." That was the moment Claire realized no amount of framing, no amount of guiding the narrative could change the truth anymore. The room wasn't bending around her. It was standing solid in front of her, and she couldn't move it. My brother walked around the table and sat beside our mother, placing his hand over hers. "I'll call the attorney tomorrow," he said. "First thing." Claire's head snapped toward him. "You're not doing this without me." He looked at her in a way that made even me sit still. "I'm doing this for us. If you want to be part of the conversation, come. If you're going to complicate it, don't." She opened her mouth, then shut it. Her eyes glistened with a mix of anger and desperation. Mom exhaled, long and slow. "Claire, you owe us an apology." Claire blinked, slowly, painfully. Her jaw worked. Her hands twisted. Her shoulders curled inward. It took nearly a full minute before her voice came out, barely audible. "I'm sorry." No excuses. No layered words. As small and unadorned as the truth she'd hidden. She looked at me then, directly, her voice cracking open. "I'm sorry I took that choice away from you. And from him." I nodded once, not forgiving, not punishing, just acknowledging the moment for what it was. After that, people began moving quickly, numbly carrying plates, pouring water, standing up to stretch legs stiffened by tension. But no one left. Not yet. The room wasn't ready to break apart. We sat in a loose circle, afterward me, Mom, my brother, Claire at the edge of it like she wasn't sure whether she belonged anymore. The new reality settled around us like slow-falling dust. Claire wasn't exiled, but she wasn't centered either. Not tonight. Tonight, the consequence wasn't a fight. It wasn't divorce. It wasn't shouting in the driveway. It was heavier than all that. It was realizing that trust, once bent, doesn't snap back into its old shape. It rebuilds into something different or it crumbles entirely. And in that living room warm lamplight, untouched pie on the counter, Dad's handwriting at the center of it, we all saw the truth clearly. What came next wasn't going to be the same as what came before. The weeks after that family gathering didn't unfold with the speed or drama people expect when they imagine a blow-up. There were no slammed doors, no emergency meetings, no shocking phone calls in the middle of the night. Instead, everything moved the way grief does, quietly, slowly, unevenly. My brother and I met with the attorney exactly as he promised. He showed us what the law allowed, what the original will meant, and what Dad's draft clarified emotionally, even if not legally. Mom signed a statement indicating her intent to follow Dad's wishes, and because the property legally passed through her first, she had the authority to redirect it. I didn't cry when it became official, but I felt something loosen inside me, something I didn't realize I'd been holding tight since the moment. Claire's envelope crinkled in her hand. The house would be mine. not because I fought for it, not because anyone forced it, but because that's what my father wanted. And now, everyone knew it. Still, justice didn't erase the ache. Every time I drove past my brother's place, I wondered if he was angry. Sometimes I'd see his truck in the driveway and hesitate, wondering whether I should knock or just let time do the smoothing. He eventually answered the question for me. One Saturday morning, he texted, "Coffee, just us." We met at the same diner. Our parents used to take us to after-school concerts. He slid into the booth, tired but calm. He didn't offer a speech, just looked at me with that steady, familiar gaze. "I'm glad it went to you," he said. Dad knew what he was doing. His voice cracked a little at the end. I nodded, and I couldn't help it, my throat tightened. "I never wanted you to feel like you were losing anything." He shook his head. "I didn't lose anything. I almost lost the truth. That's worse." We sat there a long while, stirring the same cups of coffee, understanding each other without saying much. Grief has a way of making honesty easier and harder at the same time. Eventually, he sighed. "Claire's trying. I'll give her that." I asked how things were at home. He didn't dodge the question. "We're rebuilding," he said. "Slow, hard. Some days are okay, some aren't. But she knows the line now. And she knows I'm not letting her cross it again." I nodded, letting his words sit between us. Forgiveness isn't a clean process. It's more like sanding rough wood, slow, repetitive, a little painful. But eventually, the surface changes. Over the next couple of months, Claire didn't try to rewrite anything. She didn't argue the decision. She didn't try to corner me at gatherings. She gave distance. She offered small gestures, helping Mom with errands, dropping off meals when my kids got sick, sending a brief check-in text on holidays, not to fix everything, just to acknowledge the damage. And honestly, that was enough for me. I didn't need her to grovel. I didn't need her to suddenly become someone else. Just needed her to stop pretending nothing had happened. Mom, on the other hand, struggled more with the emotional aftermath than any of us expected. I found her sitting on the back steps of her house one evening, staring across the yard where Dad used to keep his tomato plants. She didn't look sad, she looked tired. "I keep thinking," she said without turning, "about how many things I let slide over the years." Little things, Claire said. Little ways she tried to guide decisions, ways I excused it because it was easier than confronting it. I sat beside her, feeling the coolness of the concrete through my jeans. "You did the best you could," I said softly. She shook her head. "Maybe, but I learned something, too. Keeping the peace isn't the same as keeping things right." Her words stayed with me for weeks, maybe because I'd lived the same lesson in a different form. When the paperwork finally cleared and the house officially transferred to me, I drove over alone and stood in the living room where Dad once fell asleep watching baseball games. Dust floated in the beams of sunlight, slow and unhurried. The place smelled like old carpet, cedar shelves, and memories that would outlive all of us. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt responsible. This house wasn't a prize. It was a piece of someone's heart. And hearts aren't things you win. They're things you honor. I sat on the floor and lost track of time, just breathing, just remembering. I think that's when the closure finally clicked. Not when the attorney stamped the last document, not when Claire apologized, not even when my brother and I made peace over diner coffee. Closure happened in silence, in an empty house that wasn't empty at all. Later, when I told my kids the home would be ours someday, they didn't understand the weight of it. They ran through the halls, picking rooms, laughing, claiming corners, like little explorers. And I let them, because houses aren't meant to hold regret. They're meant to hold life. We all grew in small ways that year. My brother learned boundaries. Mom learned strength without apology. I learned to stop shrinking myself just to avoid conflict. And Claire, well, she learned that manipulation may work in the shadows, but it collapses fast under the light. She and I are not close. I don't expect we ever will be, but we're civil, and we're honest, and we can sit in the same room without pretending history didn't happen. That, in its own quiet way, is healing. The house stands now not as a symbol of what was almost stolen, but as a place rebuilt on truth, my truth, Dad's truth, and the truth of what families become when they stop ignoring the cracks and finally fix them. Healing didn't look glamorous. It didn't arrive in a single big moment. It crept in slowly, day by day, until one morning I woke up and realized the anger had softened into understanding, and the story no longer hurt to tell. And that's how this story ends. with honesty, with steadiness, with a legacy protected instead of lost. And with me finally able to breathe again. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. Families break in silence and heal in truth, and the courage to speak up is often the first step toward peace.